Hey everyone, this is Danielle, also known as Gently Smiling Jaws, and welcome to my Flosstube for June of 2026. With it being June, things are warmer. I do have a fan going. I'm sure that that'll be picked up by the mic some, but I don't want to be boiling as I film this, so sorry for that noise. I will try and speak up so that I am clear over the sound of that, but let's get on to the floss tube. I had another really good stitching month, almost as good as last month, and I want to go over both the things that I worked on. There were some more books that I read, but I also kind of want to go over some stats for where I am at now that we are halfway through the year. It wasn't my goal at the beginning of the year, but as time moved on, I decided I wanted to focus on completing whips that were doable to complete, and also to try and touch all my projects. So working on that. All right, the tea for today. This is from Crimson Lotus Tea. It is it's a sample of the 2018 Honeymoon Shangpuer. See, I don't have a cake of this, but with the orders I've done over the years, I have samples of a number of things, and I've tried to work my way through a lot of the tea that I have because I have a lot of tea. I brewed this up a bit before filming, so it's had a chance to cool down some. Otherwise, I would not be drinking it this quickly. Pu'er tea comes from Yunnan province in China. This is raw pu'er or shangpuer, which means that it has just been, processed, and it's just, aged however long it's been since it was picked and processed. So this is from 2018. There's also ripe or show pu'er, and that is the same type of tea, but it's been put through a process. It's called wet pile fermentation or something that's trying to, in a short period, make the tea like it would be if you aged it, and fermented it for a really long time without going through that process. And that tea is dark like coffee. This I'm not going to be able to do this without spilling. You can kind of see a little bit. This tea is a lot lighter than that. I have some of the shopuer that I have. It's black like coffee black, and this is not that. All right, and there's, if you want to look up more information on pu'er tea, there's plenty of information online. Crimson Lotus has information on their site. If you check their social media, usually at least once a year, they're going back to China to buy tea from the farmers and all that. So, and also pu'er can be spelled a number of different ways, and so whether it's Puer, Puerh, whether there's an apostrophe in there somewhere, you'll find many variations of that. All right, so let's see. I am filming this a little earlier than I intended. I was wanting to get more stitching in, particularly on the last whip that I worked on, and I am going to work on it more after filming this, but I'd hoped to work on it more before filming. But some things I thought were going to happen this weekend have been moved to next weekend, and so I am filming this weekend because I'm not going to have enough time to make sure I get things all taken care of and edited to put up next Sunday. I'm filming this on Sunday the 21st. It will be posted on Sunday the 28th of June. So going over what I've done here, the first thing that I want to talk about is an FFO, a fully finished object. I can't remember the last time I had a fully finished object. I've had some finishes, particularly this year as I've been working to finish more things, but this is the first. I can't remember the last time I had a fully finished object. Back in 2024, I started working on Reflections of Paris by Ink Circles, and I worked on it, here and there, off and on. I started it around, the time that the Summer Olympics were starting in Paris, and said worked on it off and on. I finished it a little before a year was up, so I finished it in 2025, and I'd always planned to gift it to a family member, and it was just sitting around because I hadn't gotten around to doing the actual framing yet, but it is now framed. So here is Reflections of Paris. In this frame, I got this from, I ordered an 8x8 frame off of American Frame, and this is it's an acrylic plexiglass, and you're getting some reflection off it, I can see in the video here, but for the most part, this is there. I forget exactly which version of the acrylic this is, but it's supposed to be, kind of the more of the museum non-glare, that sort of thing. And although I am seeing some of it on the video here, in person there have been times where I have looked at this and it didn't look like there was any glass in it at all. And I know there's sellers on Etsy that sell plenty of frames as well, and I may order from them in the future. Part of my thing on this, and I feel like they did a pretty good job, was looking at the frames on Etsy and seeing the particular sizes. When there's any kind of design on the frame, it doesn't seem like there's, in a lot of the shops I look at, there doesn't seem to be any effort made to match at the corners. And I feel like this place, did a pretty good job at matching up on the corners there, and so I'm happy with how that turned out. The other thing, and I don't know fully what I'm doing when it comes to framing, so is this perfect? Not by any means. I do have this one, because I know there's people have different opinions about whether to do glass or not on this. I think both for me and for the folks that I'm giving it to, it'd be easier to give something with glass on it to make sure that you don't get dust and stuff accumulating if you're not dusting as frequently as perhaps you should be, because I know that I don't dust as much as I should, and I know the folks that I'm giving this to probably don't either. So what I did when it came to the framing was I had some acid-free mat board. I had a thin layer of batting I glued over the top of that using the Eileen's tacky glue, just gluing that down onto the mat board, lacing that around the mat board, I did buy some spacers, and I made sure that this frame, the rabbet of the frame, was deep enough that there would be space to both have the spacers and this, and the other additional piece of mat board that I was sticking over the back to kind of close everything in. And I know, looking at this, there are things that could have done better, but for my first attempt at doing kind of all that in a frame like this, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, and for my purposes, I think it worked out just fine. So yeah, I am very happy with this, and I wanted to make sure that I got a chance to show this before before it goes off to its new home. So yes, it was instead of doing this as one color, I decided, because it was Reflections of Paris, I decided to do this in the colors of the French flag. And I had kind of carefully counted out, the number of stitches across to try and get everything as even as possible. So yeah, I am quite happy with this, and I am looking forward to framing more pieces. And I have a number of finishes. Put this down here. I have a number of finishes that are ready to be framed. I just have to figure out what I want and what I need to budget for the frames that I want. I'm happy with the frame that I chose for that. If I was keeping it myself, I may have picked something a little more ornate, but because I know who I'm giving this to and I want it to fit in with how they have decorated things, I felt like going with that frame was a much better choice than going with something that was more ornate but likely not to someone else's taste. So yeah. All right, so time for another sip of tea. As soon as I start filming, that's when I feel my voice starting to get froggy and everything. As soon as I need to start talking, that's when my voice decides it's not time to do that. All right, so as I go through, I have 4 finishes this month. 2 of those are small sections of larger pieces, but I'm still counting them as finishes because they are a pattern that has been done. So my goal for this month was to make it my Jacob June and work on all my modern folk embroidery pieces, and I knew that there was at least one that I figured I might be able to finish, and I managed to do that. So the first piece that I worked on, and I did manage to finish, is Spirits of the Dead. So let's bring this up here. And now I'll have to reach into my project bag and get out the details on the fabric and floss so I can share that with you. But this, I put in 2,845 stitches in order to get this finished. So let me grab my info card here, and also this was one of my oldest whips. I started this back July 5th of 2023. The fabric is a 32 count ancient linen by Picture This Plus, stitch 2/2, and the floss is Silken Colors Smokestack. And I have to say, it had been quite a while since I stitched on this, and when I pulled out the floss, I realized that I really like this. Here I have some in a little bit of a jumble there. I like it. It's black, and actually, now that I'm saying this, I like this a lot, but there was another project that I was working on where I liked that black even better. So this smokestack is, it's dark, but there's some variegation to it. There's some brown tones in there. Let me hold this up again, and let me pick up what I dropped on the floor, and then so Silken Colors Smokestack. So bring this up here. So what sticks into my mind about this piece was that up here I started with this center motif and the skull, is that Jacob's pattern for this has 2 versions of the pattern. One where you're stitching kind of the positive image, and the second where you're stitching the negative space. And I loaded the pattern up into Pattern Keeper, and I got about 400 stitches in at the beginning, and then I looked at it and I realized I had imported in the wrong version of the pattern. And so this pattern started off with me ripping out everything that I had done and starting over again, which was not fun, particularly with this being an early on pattern. So that was a little disheartening to me at the beginning. But as you can see, kind of towards the middle, you can see some of the variegation in this floss. I think, here's this with the quote and everything from Edgar Allan Poe. And I think that if I were to stitch this now, because this was I only started stitching in 2022. So this was probably about a year into stitching. I started this. And my taste for, the fabric and stuff that I stitch on, things have changed over time. I will say, this month I stitched on a couple things that were on 32 count fabric, and I will say it is very nice to stitch on. It is easy on the eyes, and it kind of goes pretty quickly. But I'm not a huge fan of stitching with 2 strands of floss these days. So although I didn't mind it for what I was working on with this and some other stuff, if I was starting a new project, that would not be my go-to. I'd be more likely to pick a 40 count fabric and stitch with one strand. And I think if I were to do this now, I would be more likely to do it on the smaller count fabric with 1 strand, and probably I would only do this top kind of rectangle. I think that's what I would go with. But I'm glad I have the whole thing done. And I don't really mind stitching text. But I don't know, when I was doing this, it just seemed a little daunting, and I was much happier doing all the filling around the text at the bottom versus actually stitching text up here. But in any rate, it is done. This is one I'm considering framing. Again, of the various things I have done, I haven't fully decided what I am going to frame, and if so, what gets framed first. And it will probably again be stuff that I am just getting frames and framing myself, because getting stuff professionally framed can be expensive. And though I know that people have Michaels do that stuff, the Michaels nearest me isn't that far away, but it's sort of more than I would kind of care to trek to. And I don't know, I would rather be the one in control of what is happening with my pieces, because I don't necessarily trust that the folks at a Michaels would treat my items how I would want them treated. And the last professional framer that I used for anything that was here closed down a number of years ago. And although there are certainly other professional framers here, right now I'm not looking to spend the amount of money that they rightfully charge for their services. I'm just at the moment, the taking care of it myself will be just fine for my needs. All right, so that was my first whip and the first finish of the month. Set this here. Next up is, this was the stitch along for a couple years back, and I will let you know. Excuse me. I started this January 1st of 2024. This was the stitch along for 2024 for Modern Folk Embroidery, No Time Like the Present. Mine, I stitched it on 40 count linen from Bestitch Me in the color Through the Stones. Stitched 1/2 with the Thread Gatherer Silken colors in Chestnut and Snow Cream. And this was something I had ambitiously started in on with grand plans of, keeping up throughout the year, and I did not. I kind of early on, a couple months in, realized that the amount of stitching that I needed to do each month in order to have it done that year was sort of way more than I was comfortable keeping up with. And although I have been stitching a lot these past few months, I know that sort of that speed is not sustainable for me long term. And I imagine that, before long, my numbers, my stitch counts are going to drop down a lot. And so I'm just enjoying it while it lasts. So for this month, I put in 961 stitches, and I know it was in this kind of area up here of the brown. And I kind of was finishing off sort of that area there. And let's bring this in. In some ways, I really like my floss and fabric choice. Other times I second guess it because I feel like some of the contrast should be a little more, I think, with the Snow Cream and the white. But, I had this sitting for so long, and I just hadn't even looked at it in a long time. When I pulled it back out, I thought, hey, that's not so bad. I actually am, kind of pretty fond of how it's turning out. But that said, I enjoyed putting in the bit under 1,000 stitches that I put in, but I decided that was enough for me right now. I don't feel any draw to, go back to this anytime soon. It will continue to sit for a while until the time is right. So I am glad that I worked on it and got some progress in, but also there's no plans on a big push to get this done either. There's no time like the present isn't going to get worked on anymore just yet. It can sit in its time out until I am ready. But planning to touch all the whips is a good way to make sure that some progress is being made even when you don't really wanna. So okay, this next one, and you'll know what this is if you've been watching and you see the watermelon bag. This is one that I thought I may be able to finish, and I did. This is, get out my details here. This is Jacob's free pattern, Free Palestine. And this up here above was a pattern from Hib Stitches that you could get if you donated to, I don't remember if it was just the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund or if there was others as well, but that was the one I donated to for this. So that was done some time ago, and then I just added onto this piece of fabric, which is 46 count Winter Wren linen by Fox and Rabbit. And as I stitched on this, I remembered how much I really like this fabric, and I think I have a big chunk of it. I don't remember if it's 40 or also 46 count. But I'll have to figure out, once I am allowing myself to do starts again, I will have to figure out what I want to put on that. But this is, I stitched this 1/2. It's a selection of silken colors. So the white is just DMC. The other colors, and I have this here, let me pull this out. Yeah, so the white is DMC. The black, this is what I was talking about, the ink black from Silken Colors, come on, is, as I was using this, I was like, I really like this. And I've got, you know, stuff left over from this project, but it sort of makes me want to use this to stitch something that's monochrome black, in which case I would probably need to get some more skeins of it, but I quite like this. The green is Coastal Seaweed, and the red is Crimson. And this was a little slow going, being a 46 count fabric. I will say I really like how things look on 46 count. I am discovering that even with magnification, I'm finding it a little tricky. It just, I can obviously do it, but it takes a little longer in the magnification and kind of the squinting at the fabric. So let me bring this in so you can see this. And because Jacob had released this pattern some time ago, I forget which year was on the pattern itself, but I made it 2026. I just opened up some other modern folk embroidery pattern that I had, that had either in the pattern itself or had a little, you know, a mini chart with letters and numbers, and took the 6 from there. And so yeah, I'm really happy with this. This is one of the ones I would like to frame, and I figure it's gonna probably have to be a custom size of frame because of how this all is with this up at the top. But yeah, we'll see. But when I first started stitching on this, and with it being, you know, kind of the slow going, I wasn't sure that I knew I was gonna obviously get a chunk of it done, but I didn't think I was gonna finish it this month. But as I worked on it, the more I was like, let's just wrap this up. Just like it would be great if things were wrapped up and there was no longer a genocide going on in Palestine, because obviously, although there is a ceasefire, things still aren't great. There's still a lot of awful things happening there, and yeah, so I would like to get this framed. I put in 2,839 witch stitches, which is not quite right. It's probably a little closer to 3,000 stitches, because there was one of the days that I think it was the first day I worked on this, I didn't jot down the number of stitches that I did that day, and I could have, and it had been a while since I stitched on it, so I could have gone back and pulled my old Hobonichi weeks, you know, from last year, to find when I last stitched on it and done the math to figure it out. But I didn't want to go digging for it, so I don't have the stitches from that day calculated in, but it was probably closer to, because I know it wasn't a ton of stitches, but it was, you know, maybe a couple hundred, so probably closer to 3,000 stitches to get this one finished. Okay. So right there, I was already really happy with how the month was going, because already that's two finishes. And then next up, which was my last modern folk embroidery that I have. Pull all this out. This is Here Be Dragons, that I started back on April 10th of 2024 in the Year of the Dragon, and I had some idea that I could at least get this mostly finished in 2024, but that did not happen. I am stitching this on 40 count linen from Bestitch Me in the color Catacombs, stitching one strand over two of Silken Colors Cerise Noir. So this is the Silken Colors. See the color there, even if it's. And here is this. So I got as far, I figure I might as well say hi. So the HI of hic is on here because it says in Latin, here are dragons, and I think it's hic sunt dracones. I'd have to look at the pattern to be sure. I did know Latin once, but it's been a long time since I have tried to translate Latin. Where I had this was I didn't have this whole band fully, kind of finished up at the top. So I got that whole top part of the band fully done and started in on the letters, and I am happy with how things are coming, although ideally I would be, further along than this, but this is where we are at. It's a lot of stitching in that border, and so letters to do, and then obviously the big dragon with the border carrying down along. So, man, this is one that's not going to be done anytime soon. I forget how many stitches are in it total. And I think this is another one where the pattern is such in that you could stitch it either the way I'm doing it or you could stitch the reverse. And this is what I decided to do. And I think if I remember right, the stitch count is almost exactly the same. There's like one stitch difference depending on which version that you're doing, but this is the version that I wanted to do. I only put in 675 stitches. I thought that was, kind of a good chunk of progress. But I think I only worked on this for one day because of what I had realized, and I'm trying to remember if I realized when I was stitching on this, I'm, happily going along in my, this is my Jacob June plans, and my main thing was to get through all the modern folk embroidery, and then there was at least one other pattern I wanted to do. But as I'm doing this, I was like, wait a minute, June is Pride Month. I have 2 Stitch for Pride stitch alongs that I never finished. I need to pull those out and make progress. I need to touch them this year anyway. Why not pull them out during June, because that's what makes the most sense. And so I realized, okay, well, I will let's only work on Here Be Dragons for one day and then move on to pulling out the Stitch for Pride pieces. So we started with the Stitch for Pride 2024. And this is the first one that I participated in. And I had seen when the pattern had gone on sale, like in the December before, but I hadn't been sure I was going to do it, and I ended up not buying it. And so then I was watching as everybody else was stitching on it as the year started, and thought, oh, I kind of wish I had done that. And then in June of 2024, that's when there was a small window of time when D of D's 20 Stitches made the pattern available again for a short window of time. So in June of 2024, I went and purchased it and tried catching up. I got through January, February, March, April, but hadn't gotten any further than that. And so I went, and so I had done previously these 4 over here, and this is May, and that's the one that I did for this month. I put in 801 stitches, and so this is a partial finish because each of these is like a separate pattern, but I'm doing the spot sampler that puts them all together. And what I was doing on this, which was, not an original idea because so many other people were doing this as well, in carrying over a color from the previous month. So January, this is February, so the blue carrying over, then March, the green carrying over, April with the orange, and then May I carried over the pinky red up to this. I will say, as I was doing these, I have not delved into doing all the learning that I should have for the month. The artist that this one is based off of is Yishe Garbage, and she's a trans artist. I know that her work has a lot to do about things to do with kind of borders and boundaries and things that countries do, and like that. I did watch a video. And I'm trying to remember if that was one. If the video that I watched was one that was linked in the PDF, or if I had gone and looked up. I may have gone and looked up a different video and watched that as well. But I have not delved into all of the learning for this month, and I should have, but I had just realized I needed to get a couple of things done, and I wanted to get them done before the video, so I did not spend as much time doing that as I feel like I should have. But still, that's one more month of progress. So now I'm through May on this one. I thought, for some reason, I was thinking that what was May was the June portion, which is the Frida Kahlo one. And I should say for this that I am not using any called for colors on this. I am just grabbing from Stash, and I think most, not all, but I think most of these colors are from the Dying for Sass Goth Rainbow palette of colors, but I think not everything. I think this lighter blue was Dying for Sass, but it was not from that palette of colors. The one for June kind of goes down in this area, and it's for Frida Kahlo, and I think that the model shows that being in yellow, and I have a Dying for Sass yellow that I want to choose. In fact, I think it's one that I'm used on the next piece that I will bring out. So again, still a long ways to go on this, but I feel like I've made progress, and because the pattern is one little pattern for each month, it felt like that finishing one of those was kind of the right way to put in progress on that. And so following up on that, the next piece that I pulled out was my other Stitch for Pride 2025. And once again, this is pulling from Stash. The fabric that I am using for this is a 40 count Picture This Plus shadow linen, but the fabric is like tight enough that to me it's sort of, and I think it's the holes on this being smaller, I'm assuming from dyeing, how the fabric how the holes shrink up on that. So that combined with the dark color, this felt more like stitching on a 46 count to me. And so I was struggling a little bit with this, and because this pattern was this is the July pattern, and it is 1,451 stitches, and I had sort of reached a point where I thought maybe I'm not going to be able to finish this, but I pushed through, and yesterday I finished. So here is everything, again, this is pulling from Stash. This is Dying for Sass colors. There's some cottage garden threads, and the pattern that I worked on this month down here, I pulled a Brin and Needle floss. And as I was stitching on this, I thought, I haven't heard too much from Brin and Needle lately. And I knew that they had a physical store that they had eventually closed, but they were still going to do stuff online, but I hadn't remembered seeing anything online. In fact, I meant to go and do some more looking. As I thought about it, I had grabbed my phone and tried to pull up their website, and it seemed like there was a website, but I don't know that it was all. It didn't seem like it was fully functional, and so that had me a little concerned. I don't know what the status of their store is, so I'll have to look at that and see about, if there's something I can link to. I did pull up their social media, and it seemed like that their last post was quite some time ago. But this is, and I didn't jot down the name of the particular floss that I used, but it's one of their speckled flosses, and then I carried over one of the Dying for Sass colors, which I think may be Mr. Green Jeans, that I used for the snake down at the bottom. So let me bring this up here. And again, I haven't done all the learning on this, but just from looking at the pattern, this was the July pattern for Emilio Robles Avila, and I think it's about him being part of I forget if it was the Zapatistas he had joined with and had been involved in some kind of revolutionary stuff in Mexico. And I think it had said that he had passed away at the age of 90 something back in it was in the 80s, so not that long ago, and that it wasn't until kind of even though he had lived the vast majority of his life as a man, that he was not recognized by the government as any sort of revolutionary hero until the last few years of his life. So I need to go and do more of the learning on that. But the text on here is La Tierra es para quien la trabaja, which said that the land is for those who work it. And yeah, that's I had confirmed with what the pattern said, but my Spanish is also very rusty from, I think the last time I took Spanish was back in high school, and then some Duolingo in years past, and at least I had known enough that looking at this, I kind of figured out what it meant, and then went and confirmed with the pattern and stuff. But yeah, so I've got this pretty much framed out, and so have a few more months to do on this, but it felt good to make progress on that as well. Let me tuck this way. All right, so when I figured out that that was 1,451 stitches to finish that little chunk. So those were my fully finished object, my 2 finishes, and then my 2 kind of mini finishes. When I realized that I should probably be filming this video today instead of next weekend, there is one more pattern I wanted to make sure that I worked on this month, and in today in particular. So I will work on this more after filming this video. But yesterday, after I finished up the second Stitch for Pride one, I pulled out Birds to the Boughs by Lindy Stitches. And this is one where I am stitching. This is something I am keeping for myself, but stitching it in honor of my parents, because I like the pattern. If my mom had interest in cross stitch, I would offer it to her, but it's not really her thing. So this is where I am at, and this I started back September 2nd of 2023. So I started this on my dad's birthday that year, and this is where I am currently at. So last night I put in 379 stitches, which got this border kind of down to the bottom here, and then we're starting to work on these swirly bits. And that's where I'm at so far. Last year I got the bird. I think I got the bird finished. This bird finished last year, and obviously I have a lot more to do. This is on 32 count Belfast Whisper Linen by Zweigart. This is the called for DMC, and I'm stitching it 2/2. As I was stitching on this, particularly after the 46 and the 40 count that seemed like 46 count, the stitching I put in seemed to go by really quickly last night. So with today being Father's Day, I want to go and put more work in on this. And then, although a lot of my stuff that I'm working on this year, I'm touching it and then it's getting set aside so I can get on to the next whips that I need to touch. This is like the only one that I have a plan to pull out a second time, as I will make sure to stitch on this again in September around my dad's birthday. So that's where we are at so far. I think I put in the back stitching up here last year. I have to do that around here. I'm trying to finish kind of this portion and then kind of continue to move that way. This is one where my mistake was that I went up on this border further than I should have, so there's a gap here which shouldn't be there. And once this is done, I will go in and maybe fill in just like some little dots of color or something, just to kind of not have that gap up there. But we'll see when the time comes. But yeah, so a little bit in on this. So looking at what I did this month, so last month when I did my last video, I had done 10,203 stitches. This month I did 9,951 stitches, and then whatever that amount was that I didn't get noted down, that I'm figuring is maybe 200-ish stitches or so. So I probably stitched about the same this month as I did last month. So not too bad. So let me tuck this back here. Oh, helps if I keep my little card in there. All right. Time for another sip of tea. Okay. Now that we are about halfway through the year, I wanted to talk about kind of where I'm at as far as going through all my whips. So what I have in here is at the back of my weeks, I made a list of all my whips that I had at the beginning of the year. And then as I work on stuff, I make a mark by that, and then I check it off if I get it finished. So I've been kind of dutifully noting what I've done and what I have left to do on this. So at the start of the year, I had 35 whips. Out of those 35 whips, I have worked on 22 of them, and out of those 22, that I've worked on them. I have 10 finishes, although 2 of those are just, kind of partial finishes, and those whips are still in my list. I have 27 projects that are still whips at this point. I have 13 whips that I still need to work on before the year is out, and I'm imagining in the next 2-3 months I will have touched the rest of those whips. I have not started anything new. The one start that I have is a restart. My the Owl Forest Alice in Wonderland that I had only done a tiny bit on, I had restarted that, and I think may only be like 250-ish stitches on that start. And so that it was a new start, but it was an existing whip. So that's the only thing that I've started this year. And I didn't, plan that I wasn't going to start anything new. I just knew that my focus was going to be on working on existing whips and trying to finish what I could. And as I was seeing progress, I just got in the mindset, nothing new until you've touched everything. Nothing new until you've touched everything. So that's sort of what I feel comfortable with doing, although I have a few things in my head of things I would like to start, but it feels so good to check things off the list and watch the number of whips go down that I don't want to start anything. I do want to start new things, but I also don't want to start anything new just yet. So I'm feeling really good that I will, kind of touch everything this year. And let's see here. And I think, out of the things, let me look at my list of finishes. I think 3 of the things that I finished or modern folk embroidery things. I finished Jilbakan back in January, and then this past month, The Spirits of the Dead and Free Palestine. So, yeah, I finished 3 modern folk embroidery things this month. And, yeah, of the things that are on my list, how many of these do I think I can realistically finish this year? There's 1, 2. I think there's 2 of these. 2 of the remaining things that I think shouldn't be a problem to finish off. And the rest of these, I don't know that there's anything where there are few enough stitches that I could really wrap it up yet this year. I think that there's 2 that I could knock off the list, so I could get it down to 25 whips, and then I would feel like I could add some more things. But yeah, I don't have any firm plans for what I'm going to stitch in July. I know, and I sort of like how I've been focusing on a designer, or 2 designers, because of past year it was my Jacob June, but it also ended up being stitching on the 2 projects that I have from Dee's 20 Stitches for Pride, with it also being June. Looking at these, what I have left at some point, and whether it'll probably be either in July or August, I will work on my long dogs. And I have 1 long dog is my oldest whip, which is from September of 2022. And that's not going to be finished this year, but I should be able to get a chunk of that done. That's also, I think, the only project that I have on Lugana, and I'm doing, I forget the count, it's a 32 count Lugana, and I'm doing 2 strands on there. And I don't know, the last time I stitched on it, I mean, I like the project well enough, but I wasn't enjoying the stitching on it, but I'm far enough that I want to just keep going. I'm too far in just to stop, even though I have much more to finish than I have done. But yeah, that's one that I want to, when I do my long dogs, that one will be touched, because for long dog I have Opening Gambit, Saga, which I should be a lot further on, but I don't know, that's one where I've worked on it some. When I work on it, I enjoy it, but it's so big, and I don't know, there's some stuff that I have or working or pulling it out on a regular basis and working on it, because I know some people will work on stuff like, you know, once a week or something like that, or have some other system, and I think that sort of thing, I don't know, it doesn't appeal to me. I want to work on things when I want to work on them, and then I'm kind of done for a while. So, Opening Gambit, Saga, Fish and Ships. I think those are the three things that I have from Long Dog. Fish and Ships, I should be able to get a good chunk done on that, because when I started that in 2024, it's been a while since I've stitched on it, but I made a big push, and I got like a quarter of the way done, what felt like really fast. I think what has sort of tripped me up a little with that one is because, I don't know, it's like I find it more fun to stitch things adding in multiple colors, and that's the one where I'm adding it. I'm mostly doing it in a Silks for You. It's kind of tone on tone. The fabric and the floss are pretty close, and then I was adding in some touches of color with some Brennan Needle silks on that. And then once I got those in, then I started to wonder if it was like too much and I shouldn't have done it, but I also don't really want to change it. And so I think that the second guessing myself is then when I kind of slowed down and moved on to other things. But I think with that one I can put in, I'm not going to finish it, but I can put in a good chunk, and I think there's at least one other area where I do want to add in a little bit more color, but I think I want to keep the bulk of it just the Silks for You, and just have those couple places with the other color. So yeah, so Long Dog, I want to have a month where I focus on that, whether that's July or August, I'm not sure. Artsy Housewife, I have, I think is it two pieces from her, the Dark Golden Delicious and Dream Within a Dream. And yeah, neither of those are going to get finished right now, but I can put a chunk into those. Yeah, so I'll have to figure out exactly, you know, kind of what I'm doing with that. And like I said, there's the two patterns that I think, you know, should be a definite to finish up this year, which is the temperature chart that I designed that was for last year, and I just have to finish putting in the stitches for the temperatures. And I think I got maybe partway through May putting the temperatures in, but it's only like 6 stitches that I need to do for each day. So if I just need to find a time where I want to work on it and just get that done, probably in, you know, just a couple sittings, it should be fine to get it done. I just need to focus on it, and I just haven't wanted to do that just yet. The other one I think I can finish is the Plants in Petrichor. Sal was from 2024, and I got quite far. It was just like, I think the last couple parts I got tripped up, or just wasn't feeling like stitching at the time. So I have a bit left, but it shouldn't be that much to finish it up. Okay, I think that is all. That's all the stitching. Let me just make a little note here. And I know I've mentioned it before, but I use a Hobonichi Weeks to keep track of my stitching, and I had been using a separate notebook for my Flosstube notes. I went with the what was it called? This is the larger size of this is the Hobonichi Weeks Mega, and it has in the back of the weeks, it's thicker because there's more pages in the back, and that's been working out great to have everything contained in one go. As I work, and I should also mention that I caught up on, so the weeks has the days of the week, a place to just write over here. So I note in on this when I'm stitching on stuff, what I'm working on, how many stitches that I did on the days. I may write additional notes over here. My new thing this year is I am putting in photos of the things that I finish as I finish them, so it's something I can look back on and I have a reference for the things that I have finished. And so there was the whole thing, if you've been watching me, that I had a little Canon selfie photo printer that I had for like 9-10 years, and it stopped working. I took it apart, put it back together, was trying various things to fix it versus just buying something new. It was the selfie, like 1200 or something, and eventually, after not having any luck, I caved and I bought myself a new one. It was the selfie, like 1500 is the current one. And after watching people who talk about journaling stuff, online, one of the things that I saw people mentioning, and it's what I have done, that was the all treats no tricks from earlier this year, is that when it prints out, it's this photo paper that's thicker. If you're putting it in a journal-like thing like this, that was the Freedom Motif Sampler from earlier this year, is that if you take that paper, like use your fingernail or something at the edge of it, since it's thick, you can split that paper in half. You can peel the back off of it and it becomes a lot thinner, and so it makes your journal a lot less bulky. And that is what I have been doing for this. So actually last night I sat down and I started going through and putting in the pictures of the finishes that I hadn't gotten to yet, because since I'm printing these out, kind of at a smaller size, the selfie photo paper is all like 6x4, and so I'm printing out like multiple photos on one sort of thing. So I was sort of waiting until I had a number of things to print out to catch up on this. So this was my modified version of Second of Focus of Multiply Kindness, where I made it smaller and changed things significantly. And there is Perky Lion. That was my BBL Drizzy lyrics. And then I have both my Spirits of the Dead and my FFO of Reflections of Paris. My Freedom Motif Sampler. I'm really liking having the images in this as well, because then you, instead of just the text, you actually have the visual reference of what the stitching looked like. And then my 2 Stitch for Pride sections. Okay, so yeah, I am caught up with that. Liking this Hobonichi Weeks. So that, I think, is going to be the total of all the stitching portion of this. I yammered on for a little over an hour. And so now, this last bit, which I'm not going to spend too much time on, is about the books that I've gone through. And I have, went through a few here. It's, kind of audiobooks from the library. Some of this I should have looked up how to pronounce this one author's name. But, okay, let me go through. So I think when I filmed last, I think I had either just started or was about to start the book, The Jump by Natalie Keller Reinhardt, and it's another horsey book. It's about 3-day eventing, and I was reading this one. This, I think, was the newest book from this author, and I mentioned how some time ago I was on some webpage and I got an ad for one of her other series of books, which I guess is her most popular series, that it's like a 3-day eventing romance series of books. And I had requested it for my library when I saw that, just because I thought the idea was sort of silly, and I'm not a romance book reader, but I was sort of intrigued and I kind of wanted to read this. My library didn't have it. I put in a request to let me know if the book became available, and I hadn't been reading, and suddenly I got a notification that this book was available, and that's sort of what got me back reading again after my last kind of dry spell of not reading anything for a number of months. And as I said, that book wasn't the greatest book. It was, like I said, because I don't read romance novels, I don't know how to judge whether it was really a romance novel or not. I felt like there wasn't a whole lot of romance in it. There certainly wasn't smut, if that's what you want in your romance. But yeah, it was what it was. I didn't find the main character in there that likable, but it was easy enough to kind of get through, and it got me reading again. So this book, The Jump, is more of a standalone one. I like this better than that first book. Excuse me. This one didn't really have any romance in it, which again was fine with me. It does have a bit of animal abuse in it, so there's a warning for that. The gist of this book is you have somebody who wants to do, they're young, they want to do 3-day eventing, and they've sort of been given this time limit by their parents, you can stay here, rent free and work towards your dream, but you have this amount of time to do it, and after that, you need to start paying for things and get a job and all that. And so it talks about her getting accepted to be a working student with this well-known trainer, and kind of how things go from there. And what was interesting with this, and I thought the book was fine. Again, not the best book ever, but I'm finding these books easy to go through. So when shortly after reading this, I got a notification myself, because after I read the first book in that series, which is like I think a 7 or 8 book series, I had marked stuff to let me know when the other books became available from the library, if the library got them. And it had just been within a couple weeks, suddenly I got a notification that I think they got most, if not all, the rest of the books in that series. So I've got other stuff sort of in my queue to work through, but I will go back and work my way through the other books from that series. What I thought was interesting, and probably just because as I have been reading this stuff, I have been consuming more horse-related content, which is then going to put more stuff in my various algorithms that it's horse-related, is that recently in the UK, there was, I think it was just a dressage and show jumping competition that was specifically bridleless. And I haven't, again, I am somebody who learned all I could about horses as a kid, have only had actually, limited interaction with horses, in that for a very short period of time, probably a couple of months in high school, I took some horse riding lessons. But yeah, I am by no means a horse expert. But this competition over in the UK looked very interesting, and from the bit of reading that I did on it, it sounded like that in order to compete in this, you had to, I guess, to apply to compete, you needed to be able to show that you could, control your horse without a bridle, and I think that you had to show like 3 different methods that you could use to like stop your horse if needed, just to kind of make sure everybody was safe. But yeah, it was of doing, dressage and jumping without a bridle on your horse, and that was very very interesting to see that, and particularly after just reading this book, The Jump, that I like to see that. So I'm sort of somewhat consuming some horse content through social media and these books. So yeah, that book was fine. Again, not the best book ever, but fun enough to read through. Next after that was Yesteryear by Carl Claire Burke, and everybody is reading this book. I'm sure you can find all sorts of reviews all over social media without delving into it too deeply, because you've probably already heard what this book is about. It's someone who is like a trad wife social media influencer, and then she wakes up and discovers that she's sort of in the time that her online content is romanticizing, and how difficult it actually is. And yeah, again, the best book ever? No, but I enjoyed it, and it's I guess the thing there is about how when you have the influencers or anybody that sort of romanticizes a period of time where women had much less agency to be doing all these things, that really the way that they are doing these things is because right now they have the agency to be running their own business and hiring people to take care of all the stuff that needs taken care of, because all this stuff that they're showing involves so much time and effort that yeah, so you have, it's just, and then I was thinking about it again this morning, because this morning, because it's Sunday, I was watching the latest video from Rewilding Jude about a guy who moved to a cottage in Scotland and is working on, fixing up the place and trying to, do all this stuff, handling it on his own as much as possible for, mostly budgetary reasons, because you can't afford to be having people doing everything. And really his video that he just posted was about the upcoming renovation of his cottage, and what his original plans were, and how he's possibly going to have to change those because of, budgetary reasons. And this, and it went through my mind after reading this book, and about how, you get like a lot of stuff on social media, the, picture perfect, romanticized, versions of things. And here you have, Jude talking in his video about, what his plans were, what that is going to cost, and how that's not really workable for him, and how he's going to have to, look at being realistic and figuring out what to do, how to change plans to make it into something that's workable. So that was just kind of going through my mind. And yeah, check out Rewilding Jude's channel. I forget when I found it, in relation to when he started it. I think I found it maybe like a few, well, I don't think he was at the year mark yet of having started this whole journey. And now I sort of wish I was back at the beginning of finding his channel, because there was a period of time where there were so many videos to catch up on that I just would sit down and watch several of them in a row. And it took me a bit to catch up, and now I have to wait, like once a week to watch them. And, it's not as fun as when you could just binge them. So, okay. Next up. This is the author's name I should have looked up. This is Rejection Fiction by Tony Tulathamute. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. I know I have heard it pronounced and thought to myself I needed to double check it, and then I forgot to do that before watching this video. So this book, my last video, I talked about this book that I had read called Bad Nature. And both that one and this book were ones where one of the booktube people that I watch is Frankie Shelf, and he had talked about both of those books and how he was going to read them. And because when he talks about books, there's lots of spoilers. If it's something where it's a book I think I want to read, then I have to, not watch the review, or read the book first before going to the review. So I had borrowed both books from the library. I had gotten partway through Bad Nature, and then for whatever reason had stopped and didn't even get to this Rejection book. And so when I went back and last month had gone through Bad Nature, I figured, well, I should go and read Rejection now as well. And because it had been long enough, I don't think I even had to put the book on hold and wait. I was just able to borrow it. This is a book where it's not going to be for everyone, and this is a case where I think that listening to the audiobook was probably better for me than physically reading the book, whether as an ebook or a physical book. And because I went back, once I finished this, I listened to Frankie Shelf review of this, and talking about, like the uncomfortableness and secondhand embarrassment of listening to this. I think I had less of that, because for certain parts of this book, I was able to kind of tune things out a little bit, because I know a lot of people say audiobooks don't work for them because your mind starts wandering or whatever. And so I think that that's what my mind did when it needed to do when I was going through this book. The basis of this is it's a number of short stories that are all interconnected in some way. There are characters that connect through them, that have to do with various kinds of rejection. And there's one of the short stories in here, in which there is a very long, extremely graphic description of a porn video that this character wants to have made. And it goes on for a really, really, really long time. It's like, I don't remember how many minutes on the audiobook, but it sounds like it was pages and pages and pages in the actual book. And that was a part where my mind was able to just like tune out a little bit and just say, this is absolutely ridiculous, and then just sort of go about whatever stuff or chores I happened to be doing while I was listening to this. So I think that was better than sitting and physically going through that whole description. And I think also my favorite one of the stories to listen to, which is written as if it's an "Am I the Asshole?" Reddit post of this guy who he's like a tech bro, and he says that he was homeschooled, but he taught himself, like all the slang that was out there so he could like be with it, for all be in tune with everybody else. And hearing somebody read that out with all of the like slang that's every like 2 or 3 words, I think maybe that worked better for me than actually reading it on the page. But yeah, I thought that story was, I mean, all of this is pretty dark, but I found that one very, very funny as well. So yeah, it's not a book that is for everyone. And I feel like there was some parts of this where, yeah, I mean, your mind's starting to wander when you're listening to an audiobook is a thing. And I listen to them now because I can do it while I'm cross-stitching or other things, and I find it a lot easier to do that than to just sit down and read and focusing on reading, which is really, I mean, and for some things, maybe I should just be sitting down and just focusing on the reading, but this was fine for that. So yeah, I enjoyed it. It's not for everybody. Know that there's a lot of graphic stuff going into it. Next up was this book, which I do have a physical copy of. I got this last year, Slither by Stephen S. Hall, and I didn't move this further on because I had been doing some physical reading of this. I had decided I wanted to do the audiobook, and at the time I had Spotify, and the audiobook was just available for free on there, and there came a point where I decided to cancel my Spotify. I had it for years, and I didn't like some of the choices that Spotify had made and what they were doing. So I had it for years, canceled it on the spot, and I have switched to another music streaming service. But that didn't have this, and so I just hadn't gotten back to this. And then I thought, I just get it from the library, and enough time had passed where I could just check it out. I didn't have to wait any time. So there was part of kind of looking at this while I was listening. but it was mostly, listening to the audiobook. One of the things that I wanted to mention that was interesting, which was, which section was it? I think it was the Dreams of Healing chapter that was talking about, snakes being used in scientific research and how it can potentially benefit humans. And what in particular they were talking about was because of their digestive system, how that could be useful in the treatment of both cancer and diabetes. It was a little bit difficult going through that because, of course, in a lot of scientific research, it involves the, killing the snakes to then dissect them and look at how their organs are doing things. And so that is, I find that a little difficult to read about or to hear about. But the gist of it is that because snakes can go a long time without eating, I mean, one of my snakes in the last year, decided that when it got into being the fall and winter, she just didn't want to eat. I offered her food and she's like, nope, not gonna eat. So for 6 months she didn't eat, and then she's like ready to eat again, and I offer her food, she grabs it right away and she's happily eating again. But because they go from, they can go from not eating for a very long time, so their digestive system is basically, sitting there doing nothing. One of the descriptions said basically their stomach, instead of like having stomach acid, it's basically just like water in there because they're not eating at the time. To then they eat something and everything suddenly kicks into high gear, like their organs enlarge, everything is focused on digestion, and because their organs are enlarging, you have all these things, they're having all these cells, kind of replicating, doing all of that. And so but then after they're done digesting, it all turns back off again. So finding that mechanism be helpful for things like cancer, where you have all these cells that won't stop. Owing that, learning how a snake turns it on and then back off again, and it just does that, that could be helpful as far as treating cancer. And then also because they go from not eating anything from a long time to suddenly digesting a big meal, and so having all of a sudden a big rush of things, just like if you have all this blood sugar and everything, like in a person, of how they deal with that. So learning from snakes can be helpful for medical things for people, and it's just that for a lot of things, people think, oh, it's a reptile. Why? You're not going to learn anything from a reptile that applies to people. But it was also talking about all the various drugs that have already come from studying like snakes and snake venom and that. And of course, one of the other things they mention in there is that, of course, you have scientists saying that because it's a reptile, unlike mammals, if you're doing research on a snake, you're going to get a lot less pushback from the public, because it's not a cute and fuzzy mammal, which is unfortunately true. And not that, no, I have conflicted feelings, because I do think we can learn a lot from snakes, and I think that science is important, but I also really don't like the experimentation on animals that involves hurting or killing them. So conflicted feelings there. Anyway, moving on, these next 3 are very short audiobooks that I listened to. This was again from, I think I had gone back and watched, it was like, I don't know if it was last year, some long book that Frankie Shelf had done that had to do, where he was talking about all the books that he had read in the past year. And so I had kind of made note of a few things, particularly if he mentioned that they were short, because I'm like, oh, these are some short things I can get from the library and just, kind of go through and knock out. And some of this stuff, I think these were maybe ones that would have been better for me to read with my eyes versus my ears, because it had to do with sort of when and how I was consuming them, and where it wasn't sort of ideal. Some of it was when I would wake up in the morning and kind of trying to get myself up and going and starting to listen to something when I wasn't quite fully awake, and then I wasn't really absorbing it, and it was not the best thing. These three little ones were Hunchback by Sao Ichikawa, Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin, and Recitative by Toni Morrison. And I'm not sure of the pronunciation of that one. I know I was listening to something where the person, whether it was Frankie or somebody else I was watching, saying that they had heard it pronounced like multiple different ways by people, and Recitative is how I had heard it pronounced in the audiobook that I was listening to. And Toni Morrison is an author where I feel like I really should have gone through a number of her books by now, and I haven't. This is actually the first Toni Morrison thing that I've read. But anyway, Hunchback was very short. It's a Japanese author. I think this was in translation. I can't remember now. And again, it's something that starts off, there's some, pretty graphic stuff in it, and it has to do with talking about how people with disabilities, how they sort of aren't allowed to be, your society doesn't really view them as, kind of sexual beings with wants and desires of their own. And so this was, I feel like this was something where if I had sat down and read it and kind of thought about it more versus, listening to it while I was doing other things, I would have gotten kind of more out of it than I did. But that it was interesting. And I still kind of, think about that, but it was short, so I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail, and I don't want to just kind of spoil what's going on, because it's really not that long. Next one, Fever Dream. This is one where, I think maybe sitting and reading it would have been better than listening to it, because I think as I was listening to it, I'm like, after I finish this, I really need to find a review and listen to it, because I felt kind of lost and confused as to what was going on. And then when I listened to a review afterwards, I was like, oh, that makes much more sense. So I think that maybe there was some part early on that I sort of missed what was going on. And then I was listening to part of this either when I was like waking up or when I was really tired, and my mind had started to wander. I'd started to like drift off, and I had to go back and re-listen to parts of it. And so my confusion on this was a me problem. That was totally on me. And I feel like that reading it with my eyes would have been easier, because I found listening to it kind of confusing. It was creepy, but I was way more confused than I should have been. Recitative by Toni Morrison, that was another one where there was multiple things going on here. One, I was listening to part of it at times where I wasn't fully focusing on it like I should have. The book is only like 2 hours. But the first half, like the first hour, is an introduction by is it Zadie Smith? I recognize the name, and I know that she wrote a book called Teeth a number of years ago, which I haven't read. I'm not familiar with her work, but also because I'm not familiar with Toni Morrison's work. And this intro is, I think the intro, maybe more, assuming that the people reading this are much more familiar with Toni Morrison's work than someone like me, and it's referencing things that happened in the short story. And so part of me thought that it would have been better if I had listened to the actual story first and then listened to the intro second, because I think I may have gotten more out of it that way. But and then as I was listening to this again, situations where it wasn't the best for my focus to be listening to it, and I had listened to part of it, and I went back and I actually realized, okay, I need to focus, and I listened to the entire, story again, and, focusing on it more, and that I'm glad I did, because I liked it. The gist of this story is that it talks about these two girls who, let me take a sip here. These two girls who are like in custody of the state for at least a period of time, as each of them has stuff going on in their home lives where their parents can't care for them. And from how the story is described that one of the girls is white and one of the girls is black, but never in the story is it said which is which. And as you're going through it, you may think, oh, well, this girl's this and this girl's the other, and then you go further in the story and there's something else, and it's like, oh, well, wait a minute, maybe it could be the other way around. But really, all of that is just sort of your own biases about things is pointing through. If it makes you think that one is one and there's the other, because it's never specifically said. And so I think that was interesting. I'm glad that I took the time to go back and listen to it again, and I would like to listen to more of her, go through more of her work and understand that more. But yeah, those are the books that I have gone through. I've got a few other things on my list of things to listen to. One, I can't even remember the name of the one that I had sort of just started, and I think once again it's one where I actually went and borrowed the book itself in edition, and I think I'm going to try and listen to it while kind of looking at the book. I think this one is short stories, so we'll see. And it's supposed to be really, really funny. I can't remember the name of it right now, but we'll see whether I continue with this or not. Yeah, there's a number of things I was going like full steam ahead on stuff at first, but now I think it was a bumpy road with some of these short stories and my attention span, and which you think the short story would be better for my attention span right now, but that's okay. Anyway, I'm still going through books, and it's more than I had been, so happy for that. And I think, just double check everything. Yeah, I think that's it. It looks like I'm already over an hour and a half of filming time, and it looks like my SIM card is storage SD card is almost full, so I'm gonna have to wrap this up anyway. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. I will see you in August for my next video. If you were working on something, please let me know what you were working on. because although I'm not starting new things right now, maybe it's something you can convince me to start once I am working on things again. But all right, I will see you in the next video. Bye.